Good evening, dear friends. Margaret here, and I need to tell you something before we begin tonight's story. When I opened the envelope that arrived last Tuesday, I read the first page standing at my kitchen counter. By the third page, I had to sit down. By the final page, I was crying so hard I could barely see the words. The letter came from a man named Marcus Webb, a 48-year-old firefighter from Oakland, California. He'd been on the job for 23 years, fought hundreds of fires, pulled dozens of people from burning buildings. He'd seen the worst of what fire can do to human beings and somehow kept showing up, kept running toward the flames when everyone else ran away. But there was one fire Marcus had never talked about, one rescue that changed everything he thought he understood about life, death, and the voices that speak to us in our darkest moments. Marcus wrote to me because, as he said in his opening line, "I need someone to understand what happened in that warehouse. I need to say her name out loud and tell the truth about the voice I heard, because if I don't, I think it will consume me the way that fire almost did." So tonight, I'm reading Marcus Webb's confession, a story about a firefighter who heard an impossible voice in the smoke, followed it to safety, and spent 7 years trying to understand who or what had saved his life. Dear Margaret, my name is Marcus Webb, and I've been a firefighter with the Oakland Fire Department for 23 years. I'm writing this from my living room at 2 a.m. because sleep has become impossible lately. Not from nightmares exactly, more like the opposite. I'm afraid if I close my eyes, I'll hear her voice again, and this time I'll understand what she was trying to tell me. Let me start at the beginning. December 8th, 2017. A Friday night, cold and dry, the kind of night where fire spreads fast and burns hot. I was working a shift at Station 21 in West Oakland, part of Engine Company 21. 4 firefighters, 1 truck, and the constant knowledge that any call could be the one that doesn't let you come home. At 11:47 p.m., dispatch crackled over the radio. Structure fire, 1600 block of 14th Street, large commercial warehouse, reports of possible occupants inside. 3-alarm assignment, multiple companies responding. We rolled within 90 seconds. I was riding in the officer's seat that night, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, though everyone just called me Webb. My crew, driver-engineer Tommy Chen, 32, best driver I'd ever worked with. Firefighter Jake Morrison, 28, strong as an ox and twice as stubborn. And firefighter-paramedic Sarah Okonkwo, 26, 2 years on the job and already one of the sharpest firefighters I'd seen. The warehouse was an old brick building, 4 stories, built in the 1920s and subdivided over the years into artist studios, small businesses, storage spaces. The kind of place that violated every fire code in the book, but that the city never had the resources to properly inspect or shut down. I'd been in buildings like it a dozen times before. They were death traps. We pulled up to see fire already showing from the 3rd and 4th floors. Heavy smoke, orange glow through broken windows, the sound of glass popping and wood groaning. The first in company was already pulling hose lines. The battalion chief was setting up command. Engine 21, primary search, 3rd floor. The chief ordered over the radio. Reports of a female occupant, possibly still inside. Proceed with caution. Structural integrity is questionable. My crew geared up, SCBA masks, air tanks, tools, thermal imaging camera. The weight of the equipment is something civilians never understand. You're carrying 60 pounds of gear, breathing through a mask, vision limited, trying to move fast through a building that's actively trying to kill you. We entered through the main entrance, made our way up the interior stairwell. The smoke was thick even on the 2nd floor, dark, rolling, the kind that makes your eyes water even through the mask. By the 3rd floor, visibility was almost zero. The thermal camera showed heat signatures everywhere. Walls, ceiling, floor. The fire was above us and spreading. "Oakland Fire Department, call out!" I shouted. "Standard procedure. Announce your presence. Give any occupants a chance to respond. Fire Department, if you can hear me, make noise." Nothing. Just the roar of fire above us, the creak of stressed wood, the sound of water from the hose lines below. We split into search teams. Chen and Morrison took the east side of the floor. Sarah and I took the west. We stayed low, swept the rooms methodically, feeling our way through the smoke. Every artist studio was crammed with stuff. Furniture, paintings, sculptures, flammable material stacked to the ceiling. We'd cleared 3 studios when my radio crackled. Morrison's voice, strained, "Lieutenant, we've got fire coming through the ceiling. This floor is getting compromised. We need to wrap this up." "Copy. 2 more rooms, then we're out." Sarah and I pushed into the 4th studio. Larger than the others, maybe 800 square feet, subdivided with makeshift walls. The thermal camera showed a hot spot in the corner. Could be contents on fire, could be structural. We moved toward it carefully. That's when I heard the voice. Not over the radio. Not from Sarah. A woman's voice, clear as day despite the roar of the fire, speaking directly into my ear. "She's in the back corner, behind the blue door. You have 90 seconds. I froze. The voice was so clear, so immediate, that for a moment I thought someone was standing right next to me. But there was no one. Just smoke and heat and Sarah a few feet away, sweeping her tool across the floor. "Sarah, did you hear that?" I asked over the radio. We were on the same tactical frequency. "Hear what, Lieutenant?" "Someone speaking." A woman's voice. "Negative. I don't hear anything except fire." I should have chalked it up to stress, to equipment malfunction, to the way smoke and adrenaline can play tricks on your mind. But the voice had been so specific. Blue door, back corner, 90 seconds. I swept my flashlight across the studio. There, partially hidden behind a rack of canvases, a door painted dark blue, almost invisible in the smoke. "There's another room," I said to Sarah. "Back corner." We moved toward it. The heat was intense now. My gear was warm to the touch. We had maybe 2 minutes before we'd have to pull out or risk getting trapped. I tried the blue door. Locked. I used my Halligan tool to force it open. The small room beyond was full of smoke, but cooler. The fire hadn't reached this space yet. And there, on the floor, unconscious, a woman, mid-20s, wearing paint-stained clothes, not breathing. "I've got a victim!" I shouted into my radio. "Female, unresponsive, back room of Studio 4. Sarah, help me get her out." We grabbed her. Sarah took the legs, I took the torso, and started moving. Fast as we could, dragging her through the smoke. Morrison and Chen met us at the stairwell. Together we carried her down, out of the building, to the waiting medics. The paramedics started CPR immediately. Chest compressions, oxygen, monitoring. I stood there, breathing hard, watching them work, barely aware of the other crews continuing to fight the fire behind us. After 4 minutes that felt like hours, the woman gasped, coughed, her eyes opened. The medics kept working, stabilized her, loaded her onto a gurney and into the ambulance. Battalion Chief Rodriguez found me as they pulled away. "Good work, Webb. How'd you know to check that back room?" I didn't have an answer. How do you explain that a voice told you? A voice that no one else heard? Instinct, Chief. Just instinct. The fire was knocked down by 2 a.m. The building was a total loss. Roof collapsed, 4th floor gone, 3rd floor structurally unsound. If we'd been inside 30 seconds longer, we might not have made it out. The woman we'd rescued was transported to Highland Hospital. Smoke inhalation, some burns, but alive. Her name was Zoe Martinez. She was a painter who'd been working late in her studio, fell asleep, woke up to smoke and couldn't find her way out in the darkness. We'd saved her life. That's what everyone said. Good job. Textbook rescue. Another life saved by Oakland's bravest. But all I could think about was the voice. The woman who'd told me where to look, who'd given me a specific time frame, who'd known things I couldn't possibly have known. Who was she? And how had she known? For 3 days after the warehouse fire, I tried to convince myself it had been my imagination. Stress response. Auditory hallucination brought on by adrenaline and smoke exposure. The human brain does strange things in extreme situations, creates sounds, sees patterns, fills in gaps with information that feels real but isn't. But I couldn't shake the specificity. Blue door, back corner, 90 seconds. I hadn't known there was a blue door until I saw it. I hadn't known there was a back room. And the timing. We had maybe 90 seconds before the ceiling in that studio collapsed. I checked the incident report. The structural engineer's assessment confirmed it. Catastrophic failure of the 3rd floor ceiling occurred approximately 2 minutes after our withdrawal. If we'd been searching that room any longer, we would have been trapped. On December 11th, 3 days after the fire, I visited Zoe Martinez at Highland Hospital. She'd been moved out of intensive care, was breathing on her own, expected to make a full recovery. I found her in a private room, sitting up in bed, sketching on a pad of paper someone had brought her. She looked up when I knocked. "Ms. Martinez? I'm Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Oakland Fire Department. My crew and I pulled you out of the warehouse Friday night. Her eyes filled with tears immediately. "You saved my life. The doctors said if I'd been in there another few minutes, I would have died from the smoke. How did you find me?" "I was unconscious in that back room. I didn't even know anyone knew I was there." I pulled up a chair. "Can I ask you some questions about that night?" "Of course. Anything. Do you remember calling out? Making any noise that might have helped us locate you?" She shook her head. "I passed out pretty quickly. I remember waking up to smoke, trying to get to the door, but I couldn't see anything. I stumbled into the back room. I kept supplies there, and I think I collapsed. I don't remember anything after that until I woke up outside with the paramedics." "Was anyone else in the building with you? Anyone who might have known you were in that specific studio?" "No, I was alone. I usually worked during the day, but I'd gotten behind on a commission and stayed late. No one knew I was there. My phone had died, so I couldn't call for help. I thought I was going to die in that room." She looked at me with such gratitude it hurt. "How did you know to check there? That back room was hidden. You can't see the door unless you're looking for it." I wanted to tell her the truth, that a voice had told me, that someone or something had guided me to that exact spot with impossible precision. But how do you tell a woman you saved that you're not sure how you knew where to find her? "Training," I said instead. "We're taught to search every space. Sometimes you just get lucky." But it wasn't luck, and it wasn't training. After I left the hospital, I did something I'd never done before. I pulled the incident audio, the recordings from our radio traffic during the fire. I listened to every transmission from my crew, from other companies, from command. At the timestamp when I heard the voice, 11:58:47 p.m., according to my notes, there was nothing. No radio traffic, no voices. Just the ambient sound of the fire and my own breathing on the recording from my radio microphone. The voice hadn't come over the radio. It hadn't come from any external source I could identify, but it had been real. I'd heard it, and it had saved Zoe Martinez's life. Over the next week, I became quietly obsessed. I started researching auditory phenomena in firefighting, hearing voices in extreme stress situations, cases of firefighters reporting unusual sensory experiences during rescues. I found some scattered reports. A firefighter in Chicago who'd heard his dead partner's voice telling him to get out seconds before a floor collapsed. A New York firefighter who'd seen a figure in the smoke pointing toward a victim, even though no one was there. A Los Angeles firefighter who'd heard her name called in a burning house and followed it to a room where a child was trapped. Most of these accounts were dismissed. Stress, trauma, the brain's way of processing danger. Rationalized explanations for experiences that seemed supernatural. But the more I read, the more I realized these experiences, whatever their source, had saved lives. The Chicago firefighter had survived because he'd listened to that voice. The LA firefighter had saved a child because she'd followed the sound of her name. Whether the voices were real or imagined, they'd resulted in outcomes that mattered. On December 18th, I got a phone call at the station. Zoe Martinez, calling from home. She'd been discharged 2 days earlier. "Lieutenant Webb? I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your number from the hospital." "Of course, Ms. Martinez. How are you feeling?" "Better. Much better. But I need to tell you something. Something I didn't mention when you visited. I thought maybe I was confused from the smoke, but I keep thinking about it." "What is it?" "When I was unconscious in that room, I dreamed. Or at least, I thought it was a dream. I heard a woman's voice. She told me help was coming, that someone was looking for me, that I needed to hold on just a little longer." My heart started pounding. What did the voice sound like? Young, kind, certain, like she absolutely knew help was coming. And Lieutenant Webb? She said something else. She said, "Tell Marcus I sent him. Tell him thank you." The phone felt heavy in my hand. She used my name? "Yes, Marcus. That's your name, right?" She knew it. "How could she have known your name if I was unconscious and you hadn't found me yet?" I didn't have an answer, but I knew, with sudden terrible certainty, that the voice I'd heard and the voice Zoe had heard were the same, that somehow, someone, or something had been present in that warehouse, had known both our names, had guided us to each other. "Ms. Martinez, did the voice say anything else? Anything about who she was?" A long pause. She said she was sorry she couldn't stay longer, that her time was short, and she said something that didn't make sense to me. "Tell him I'm okay now. Tell him the fire didn't take me." The world tilted. Everything clicked into place in a way that made no sense and perfect sense simultaneously. What was her name? I asked, though some part of me already knew the answer. She didn't say, but Lieutenant Webb, her voice sounded so familiar, like someone I should have known but didn't. Does that make sense? It made terrible, beautiful, impossible sense, because 6 years earlier, in December 2011, I'd fought a house fire in East Oakland, and in that fire, I'd lost someone. December 2011, 6 years before the warehouse fire. I'd been a firefighter for 17 years then, thought I'd seen everything the job could throw at me. The call came in around 6 p.m. on a Sunday evening. Residential structure fire, single-family home on 73rd Avenue. Heavy smoke showing. Possible occupants inside. We rolled and arrived to find a small 2-bedroom house fully involved. Fire coming through the roof, windows blown out, orange flames licking up the exterior walls. The next-door neighbor met us in the street, screaming that someone was inside. "The girl! She's still in there! She lives there! I saw her come home an hour ago!" Battalion chief gave the order. Aggressive interior attack, primary search, rescue if possible. My crew and I made entry through the front door. The heat was incredible. The fire had been burning for a while before we arrived. Smoke filled every room. Visibility near zero. We split up. I took the hallway toward the bedrooms, crawling low, feeling my way through the smoke. The first bedroom was empty. The second, I found her in the back bedroom. A young woman, early 20s, collapsed next to the bed. I grabbed her, started dragging her toward the hall. But the fire was everywhere now, dropping from the ceiling, crawling across the floor. My air alarm started going off. I was running low on air. I radioed for help. "Lieutenant Webb, I've got a victim. Back bedroom. Need assistance." Chen reached me within seconds. Together, we got her out, through the smoke, through the heat, out the front door to the waiting paramedics. They worked on her for 20 minutes. CPR, defibrillation, advanced life support, everything they had. She never came back. I learned her name later. Gabriela Santos, 23 years old, college student at Cal State East Bay, studying art education. She'd been home alone when an electrical fire started in the kitchen. The smoke had overcome her before she could get out. The coroner estimated she'd been unconscious for 10 to 15 minutes before we arrived. By the time we pulled her out, her brain had been without oxygen for too long. Even if they'd restarted her heart, she would have had catastrophic brain damage. She was pronounced dead at Highland Hospital at 7:42 p.m. I went to her funeral. I'd been to funerals for victims before, not many, because usually when we can't save someone, we don't know them. We just know we failed. But Gabriela's family invited me. They said they wanted to thank me for trying. Her mother, Elena Santos, held my hand at the service. "You did everything you could," she said through tears. "Gabriela knew you tried. That matters." But it didn't feel like it mattered. It felt like I'd failed, like if I'd been faster, smarter, better trained, I could have gotten her out in time, like her death was proof that sometimes trying isn't enough. I carried that for years, the weight of Gabriela Santos, the what-ifs, the replays of that fire, wondering if there was something I'd missed, some way I could have saved her. And now, sitting at the fire station with Zoe Martinez's words echoing in my head, "Tell him the fire didn't take me," I understood something impossible. The voice in the warehouse, the voice that had guided me to Zoe, the voice that had known my name, had known exactly where to look, had known we had 90 seconds. It had been Gabriela Santos. The woman I couldn't save 6 years ago had saved someone else, had saved Zoe Martinez, and in doing so, had saved me from carrying her death for the rest of my life. But how? How was that possible? I didn't tell anyone about my suspicions. How could I? Hey, I think the voice that helped me rescue someone was actually a woman who died 6 years ago in a fire I fought. I'd be sent for a psych evaluation, maybe pulled off active duty, definitely questioned about my fitness to serve. But I couldn't let it go. I needed to understand. I started researching, not just firefighter experiences anymore, but near-death experiences, mediumship, the psychology of grief and guilt. I read books by neurologists explaining how the brain creates meaning from trauma. I read books by people who claim to have communicated with the dead. The scientific explanations made sense on paper. Survivor's guilt manifesting as auditory hallucination. My subconscious creating a narrative where Gabriela's death had meaning, where she helped me save someone else. The brain constructing a comforting story to process unresolved grief. but those explanations didn't account for the details. How had I known about the blue door? How had I known exactly where to look? How had Zoe heard the same voice, a voice that used my name and Gabriella's words? 2 weeks after the warehouse fire, I did something I'd never done before. I reached out to Elena Santos, Gabriella's mother. I'd sent her a card after the funeral and hadn't contacted her since. But I needed to know more about Gabriella, needed to understand who she'd been. We met at a coffee shop in Oakland. Elena was in her 50s, graying hair, eyes that carried the permanent sadness of a mother who'd buried her child. But she smiled when she saw me. "Lieutenant Webb, it's good to see you. I was surprised when you called. It's been, 6 years?" "Yes, ma'am. I wanted to ask you some questions about Gabriella, if that's okay. I've been thinking about her lately." "Of course. I think about her every day. What would you like to know?" I didn't know how to start. What was she like? As a person? Elena's smile grew. Oh, she was wonderful. Creative, passionate about art. She wanted to be an art teacher, work with kids, help them find their voices through painting and drawing. She volunteered at an after-school program, taught kids from low-income neighborhoods. She said art had saved her when she was young, and she wanted to give that gift to others. She sounds incredible. She was. And you know what else? She wanted to be a firefighter when she was little. This was before she fell in love with art. She'd see the fire trucks and say, "Mommy, I want to save people." I told her she could do anything she set her mind to. My throat tightened. She wanted to save people. Yes, even after she chose art education, that impulse never left her. She was always helping people, always showing up when someone needed her. That was just who Gabriella was. I took a breath. "Ms. Santos, this is going to sound strange, but have you ever felt presence, like Gabriella was still around in some way?" Elena looked at me for a long moment. "Why do you ask?" "Because I think she helped me save someone recently. And I know how that sounds, but I heard a voice during a rescue, and that voice knew things it shouldn't have known. And the woman I rescued heard the same voice. A voice that said things only someone who died in a fire would say. I expected skepticism, discomfort, maybe anger that I was turning her daughter's death into some kind of supernatural story. Instead, Elena reached across the table and took my hand. 2 years after Gabriella died, she said quietly, I had a dream. She came to me, looking exactly as she had before the fire, healthy, smiling. She told me she was okay, that the fire had hurt, but only for a moment, and then she was somewhere else, somewhere peaceful. She said she was sorry she'd left me, but she was doing work that mattered, helping people who needed help. And she said, I should tell you, Lieutenant Webb, that you'd done everything you could, that she didn't blame you, that she was grateful you tried. Tears were streaming down my face. She said that? Yes. I didn't reach out, because I thought you'd think I was a grieving mother desperate for comfort, that the dream was just my brain's way of processing loss, and maybe it was, but it felt real, more real than any dream I'd ever had. And when I woke up, I felt peace for the first time since she died. I couldn't save her, I said. I tried, but I couldn't save her. But she saved someone else through you. If what you're telling me is true, if Gabriella's voice guided you to that woman in the warehouse, then she did become the firefighter she wanted to be. She saved someone, just not in the way either of us expected. We sat there in that coffee shop, two people bound by grief and impossible hope, trying to make sense of something that defied every rational explanation. What do I do with this? I asked. How do I live with knowing this might be real? Elena squeezed my hand. You honor it. You keep saving people. And you remember that Gabriella's death wasn't meaningless, that somehow, in ways we don't understand, love persists, purpose persists. The people we lose aren't really gone if they're still helping us, still guiding us, still present in the moments that matter most. After my conversation with Elena Santos, I started paying closer attention, not just to fires, but to those moments in the smoke when things felt different, when instinct seemed to be something more than training and experience. In January 2018, 1 month after the warehouse fire, we responded to a vehicle accident on I-880, multi-car pileup, several people trapped. As I was working to extricate a driver pinned by his steering column, I heard it again. Not the same voice, but a voice nonetheless. Male this time, urgent. Check the back seat. I'd been focused on the driver, but I turned around, looked in the back. There was a child, maybe 3 years old, unconscious and hidden behind the deployed airbags. If I hadn't checked, we might not have found her until it was too late. The child survived. The driver did too. And when I asked him later if he'd called out about his daughter, he said he'd been unconscious from the moment of impact. In March, a house fire on High Street. The voice again, different. Bedroom closet. She's hiding. I found a 10-year-old girl in the bedroom closet, terrified but alive. It kept happening. Not every fire, not even most fires, but often enough that I couldn't dismiss it, often enough that I started to trust it, to listen for those moments when something beyond my training spoke to me. I asked my crew if they'd experienced anything similar. Most said no, but Sarah Okonkwo, the youngest member of our team, admitted that sometimes she felt guided during searches, that she'd follow an instinct she couldn't explain, and it would lead her to victims. I thought it was just good intuition, she said. But you're saying it might be something else? I'm saying I don't know what it is, but I think we should pay attention to it. In June 2018, I attended a conference on firefighter safety in Sacramento. During a break, I fell into conversation with a battalion chief from Los Angeles. I told him, vaguely, about experiencing intuitive moments during rescues. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "How long have you been hearing the voices?" My heart stopped. "How did you—" Because I hear them too. Most veteran firefighters I know hear them. We just don't talk about it, because talking about it makes you sound crazy. But yeah, voices, feelings, presences that guide us. I've heard them for 20 years, saved countless lives because of them. I stopped questioning it a long time ago. What do you think they are? He shrugged. Guardian angels. The spirits of people who died in fires. Our own subconscious processing information faster than our conscious mind can handle. I don't know, but I know they're real, and I know they save lives. That's enough for me. Over the next year, I quietly interviewed other firefighters. Not officially, just conversations during training, at conferences, in the station late at night. And I discovered a pattern. About 30% of veteran firefighters reported experiencing something similar. Voices, feelings, intuitions that proved accurate. Most had never told anyone. Most had rationalized it or dismissed it. But when pressed, when given permission to speak honestly, they admitted, something guides us in the smoke. Something beyond training helps us find people who need finding. Some thought it was their own intuition, years of experience creating subconscious pattern recognition. Some thought it was divine intervention. Some thought it was the spirits of victims they'd failed to save, trying to help save others. I didn't know which was right. Maybe all of them were partly right. But I knew this. Gabriela Santos had guided me to Zoe Martinez. Whether through a genuine supernatural presence or through my subconscious channeling guilt into motivation, the result was the same. Zoe was alive, and I'd been given a gift I didn't fully understand, but couldn't deny. In December 2018, exactly 1 year after the warehouse fire, I visited Zoe Martinez again. She'd recovered fully, was back to painting, had even opened a small gallery in downtown Oakland. When I walked in, she hugged me immediately. "Lieutenant Webb, I was hoping you'd come by. I have something for you." She led me to the back wall of the gallery. There, in a prominent position, hung a large painting. It showed a figure in firefighter gear emerging from smoke, carrying someone to safety. But above the firefighter, barely visible in the painted smoke, was the faint outline of a young woman, her hand extended, pointing the way forward. "I call it the guide," Zoe said. "It's for you, for the woman whose voice I heard. For everyone who's ever been saved by something they couldn't quite see but knew was real." I stood there, staring at the painting, and I couldn't speak, because the figure in the smoke, the guide, looked exactly like the photo Elena Santos had shown me of Gabriela. "She looks like someone you knew, doesn't she?" Zoe asked softly. "Yes, someone I couldn't save, someone I think saved you. Then this painting is for her too. Tell her thank you, from me, for sending you when I needed you most." It's been 7 years since the warehouse fire. 7 years since Gabriela Santos's voice guided me through the smoke to Zoe Martinez. 7 years of trying to understand what happened and finally accepting that some questions don't have answers. They just have meaning. I'm 48 now, still fighting fires, still running toward the flames when everyone else runs away, still listening for those voices in the smoke, those feelings that guide me to people who need finding. Last month, I attended Gabriela Santos's funeral. Not her first funeral. I'd been to that 7 years earlier. This was a memorial service Elena Santos organized on what would have been Gabriella's 30th birthday, a celebration of life, a gathering of people whose lives Gabriella had touched. I met some of her former students, kids she'd taught in that after-school art program, now teenagers and young adults. They talked about how Gabriella had seen something in them, had helped them believe they were artists, had given them permission to create. One young woman, maybe 19, approached me. "You're the firefighter who tried to save her, aren't you?" Mrs. Santos told me. "I tried," I said. "I couldn't get there fast enough." "She knows you tried. She told me so." I froze. "What do you mean?" "I had leukemia when I was 12. I was in the hospital, really sick, scared I was going to die. Gabriella volunteered in the pediatric ward, teaching art to kids. She spent hours with me, helping me paint. And one night, when I was at my worst, I had this dream. Gabriella was there. Except she wasn't, if that makes sense. She was older, but also not there the way other people are there. And she told me I was going to be okay, that the treatments would work, that I'd live to paint more paintings. And she said something else. "Tell Marcus Webb I said thank you for trying to save me. Tell him I'm saving others now." "When was this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "February 2018, about 6 years after she died. I didn't know who Marcus Webb was then. But Mrs. Santos told me later that you were the firefighter who pulled Gabriella from the fire, that you blame yourself, but you shouldn't. She doesn't blame you. She's grateful." I stood there on the lawn outside the community center where we'd gathered, surrounded by people celebrating a woman who died too young, and I finally let go of the guilt I'd carried for 7 years. Gabriella Santos had died. That was true. I hadn't saved her. That was true. But she'd become what she'd always wanted to be. Someone who saved people, just not in the way anyone expected, whether through actual supernatural presence or through the power of memory and meaning to shape our actions. Gabriella had saved Zoe Martinez, had guided me through countless other fires, had touched that young woman in the hospital with words of comfort and hope. Her death wasn't meaningless. Her life hadn't ended in that bedroom. It had transformed into something I couldn't fully explain but couldn't deny. I'm writing this now, Margaret, because I need people to know it's okay to hear the voices, to feel the presences, to trust the intuitions that save lives even when they defy rational explanation. I'm not asking anyone to believe in ghosts or spirits or supernatural intervention. I'm just asking people to recognize that firefighters, and probably lots of other first responders, experience moments that don't fit neatly into scientific categories. And those moments matter. They save lives. My sons, I have 2 boys, ages 12 and 14, know about Gabriella now. I told them the whole story, how I failed to save her, how her voice guided me years later, how I still hear her sometimes in the smoke, still feel her presence in the hardest moments. My oldest asked me, "Dad, do you think she's really there? Like, actually there?" And I told him what I've come to believe. I think love is stronger than we understand. I think the people who matter to us never really leave. Whether Gabriella is literally present, or whether she lives in my heart and memory and muscle memory, either way, she's saving lives. Either way, she matters. And that's real enough for me. Zoe Martinez and I are friends now. She's married, expecting her first child. She told me last week that she's naming her daughter Gabriella, after the woman whose voice guided me to save her, after the firefighter who never got to wear the uniform, but who saves people anyway. Elena Santos keeps in touch too. We meet once a month for coffee, talk about Gabriella, share stories about the lives she touched. Elena says the grief is still there. You don't stop missing your child, but it's tempered by the knowledge that Gabriella's love persists, that she's still helping people, that her death, however tragic, wasn't the end. Last week I fought another fire, apartment building in Fruitvale, heavy smoke, multiple victims. As I searched the second floor, I heard it again, that voice, clear, certain, specific. "Third door on the left, family of 4. You have 2 minutes." I found them, got them out, all 4 alive because I trusted the voice. Was it Gabriella? Was it my subconscious processing visual cues too subtle for conscious recognition? Was it guardian angels or divine intervention, or the collective consciousness of everyone who's ever died in a fire trying to prevent others from dying? I don't know. I'll never know. But I know this. The voices in the smoke save lives, and whether their source is supernatural or neurological or something else entirely, I'm grateful for them. Grateful to Gabriela Santos for showing me that death doesn't have to be the end, that love finds ways to persist, that the people we lose can still guide us if we're willing to listen. Thank you, Margaret, for letting me tell this story, for giving Gabriela's name a place to be spoken, her presence a place to be acknowledged, for helping me finally put down the guilt I've carried and pick up the gratitude instead. And to Gabriela Santos, wherever you are, thank you. Thank you for guiding me. Thank you for saving Zoe. Thank you for showing me that trying to save someone, even when you fail, creates a bond that death can't break. I'll keep listening for your voice in the smoke, and I'll keep running toward the flames, trusting that when it matters most, you'll be there to show me the way. With profound gratitude and respect, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Oakland Fire Department Station, 21. Margaret sets down the pages, her reading glasses fogging slightly from tears she doesn't bother to hide. That was Marcus Webb's letter, the firefighter who heard an impossible voice and followed it to a woman who needed saving, the man who failed to save Gabriela Santos, but who, through carrying her memory, let her save others. Friends, I don't have explanations for what Marcus heard. I don't know if Gabriela Santos was literally present in that warehouse, speaking to him, or if his memory of her death had been processed by his subconscious into a voice that guided him exactly when and where he needed to be guided. What I do know is this: Marcus saved Zoe Martinez's life, and whether the mechanism was supernatural or neurological, the result was the same. Love persisted, purpose survived death, and a woman who'd wanted to save people did exactly that, even though she never got to wear the uniform. To all the firefighters listening who've heard those voices, felt those presences, trusted those impossible intuitions, you're not alone. Marcus isn't alone. And whether what you're experiencing is guardian angels, or grief channeled into heroism, or the strange power of human memory to guide us in our darkest moments, it's real. It matters. It saves lives. And to Gabriela Santos, wherever you are, thank you for showing us that death isn't the end of saving people, that the firefighter you wanted to be is the firefighter you became, that your mother was right, love doesn't die when bodies do. Good night, dear friends. Listen for the voices that guide you. Trust the love that persists beyond death. And remember that trying to save someone, even when you fail, creates ripples that extend far beyond what you can see. Until next time.